Thursday, October 20th. And we are here today to primarily focus on the budget for looking ahead to 2026. But first, are there any comments or questions about the minutes from the March 18th meeting? We can go ahead and move to approve them.
Yep.
All right. Thank
Seconded.
you. Thank you. And next item is to review the proposed budget for 2026. There is a summary on page 3 in your packets. The proposed budget's on page 4. There's an analysis of the workforce development fund on page 5, and then a summary of our investments on page 6.
Right.
And Allison and Robin distributed this larger copy of the budget that's a little bit more legible. And I'm going to ask.
Speak for yourself a little bit more.
I'm going to ask Greg, could you walk us through?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So, 2026 budget, and like we were talking about, it really has a few big pieces to it. Really, it's fee income and our workforce development expenses. Everything else really after that, in terms of our G&A, is up probably a 4% number, right? And those are things that mainly with respect to either payroll and or anticipated expenses, with respect to some improvements in local labor monitoring, and also some general administrative type of items. So let's really talk about where we think we're going to be, right? So for 2025, we think we're going to be at about a $1.2 million deficit. We projected about a $1.648 million deficit. And, as you can see, there's, again, two big variables. Our fee revenue is down about $1 million, right? And what we had budgeted, and our workforce development is down about $800,000. So those are the really things that I really want to focus on today, right? Like we can talk about why something's up $3,000, but I don't know if we want to get into that level of detail. We certainly can, of all those different pieces there. But what I was saying before, this is COMIDA historically has budgeted top line fee revenue of $2 million. If we went back from the beginning of time, some years we're doing 2.6, some we're doing 2.8. It would kind of flush out historically at about $2 million, until these past 3 or 4 years where we have done $5, $6, $8 million with some of these very significant large projects. Amazon, Fairlife, those don't come along that often, right? Mm-hmm. Although we've kind of been lucky enough that they have kind of.
There's been rumors that you've been slacking off.
So, yeah, exactly. Like, so, whether that can continue. And again, right, it does show in our balance sheet, right? Our financial position has allowed us to have, really call it $17 million of investments, right? T-bills that, we have accumulated over these, I would say, past 5 years, that allows us to, obviously do some, allocate some of that excess into what we would call a deficit budget this year.
Yeah, and to go along with the workforce development, the money that's been made with the excess has been important as well. It probably will continue for a little while longer.
Yeah, so I mean, we're projecting. That's a good point. Like, we're projecting almost $750,000 in earnings on those funds. 780,000. Next year, you'll see that number dip a little bit. That's 665. Again, there's two big variables there. We have to do what? We have to support this deficit. So we'll probably have to not renew a couple of those T-bills potentially, right? Sure. That excess, bring them back into working capital to fund the loss, right? We do also anticipate that the rates will come down again, to a different number, right? I think we've budgeted maybe 3.5% on that excess. So those two variables kind of get you to that $665,000 of anticipated earnings on our investments. Um, you know, we talked about, you know, the fee income. Right now, we have a placeholder of $1 million. That guess is, it's kind of a guess, right? It's kind of like, hey, we really don't know, right? We really don't know what can kind of come out of the woodworks, right? Like we look at what's in the pipeline, there's conversations that happen that you just don't know at what level they're going to materialize. But I do think, based on where we are as an organization, to be conservative is better than saying, hey, we think we're gonna do $2 million again, when this year we're doing $1 million, our pipeline's not as strong, and then we're gonna budget for a break even. I'd rather be a lot more conservative and realistic to what we know about today than to be like, no, we're gonna do 2 million no matter what. Like, I just don't, I think that's hard to say that. So on the revenue side, you can see we're going down a little bit from where we are projected to be. And again, two things. We don't have that gain on sale. We sold Brew Road. That's a $225,000 plus in 25. That is not gonna, we're not gonna have that again. So that factors in, and then probably another $120,000 of less earnings or investments. That's where we get from the $2,096,000 in projected revenue to about 1.673. So revenue wise, like I think it makes sense, right? I think it's pretty conservative. We can play with that number, that $1 million, if we thought there was a different reason to have a different expectation. But I think the past 4 or 5 years allows us to be able to budget for a potential deficit. And what does that mean? That's taking what we have earned over those years, putting it back into those, you know, workforce, mainly the workforce development programs that we have already committed to. That's not really, there's really not anything new in that number, right? That's based on what we've already committed to. That says we're gonna take whatever we have generated and put it back into those programs. There is probably an opportunity to enhance that if the board wanted to do something different, right? Remember, we have $17 million that we have accumulated. What do we want to do with that capital, right? And I don't know if there's any comments about what that looks like, or if there's been any feedback from, you know, the county, or you know, about, hey, are there other initiatives that the board or finance committee need to consider at this time?
The county executive's interested in proactively developing sites and infrastructure for shovel-ready development, similar to, we've had these conversations, I think, at the board level before. Other IDAs throughout the state, Monroe County is very developed as it is. We don't have a lot of greenfield site development opportunities, but in many other communities, IDAs are develop pad sites into economic opportunity. The Micron site in Onondaga County is a result of a couple of decades worth of the Onondaga County IDAs. Development, there's the Stamp site in Genesee County that our counterpart there has invested in over the course of many years. I think the executive's interested in having COMIDA take a look at what opportunities might exist in Monroe, so that we can start to, by way of example, the Fairlife project, so that wouldn't have happened had the state not swept in with a $20 million Fast New York grant, for which COMIDA was a conduit, for the infrastructure development at the site in Webster. To the extent that other opportunities like that maybe exist, and we can get land ready for GRE and other partners to market it to site selectors, I think the executive's interested in having us cultivate those conversations. And then furthermore, there's a new grant program in the 2026 enacted state budget called Power Up New York, for which IDAs are eligible. It's very similar to the Fast New York program. IDAs are eligible to put in expressions of interest and applications for project development, for shovel-ready site development, with an eye towards specifically utilities. And I think there's a match requirement. So if COMIDA were to apply for a project or projects, we would have to come up with some matching resources, for whatever the grant is for. So those are conversations that, I believe the Power Up New York grant program, the application is not live yet, but the county executive's interested in convening a conversation about it and what role could COMIDA play. And then I'll bring that to this board, to this committee and to the board at the appropriate time. But those are some high-level insights about where the focus is going to be, I think, in the next couple of years.
So you could, I'm putting my old former superintendent of schools hat on, that's 17.6 million, you could consider it unrestricted fund balance.
Absolutely. Like we don't, our investments are not restricted for any other reason. In addition to even the earnings that we make on that, they're not restricted for a specific purpose. We have, obviously the board has in theory restricted funds in terms of our workforce development, that the fees that we generated when the board put in place the workforce development program, seeded it with $2.5 million, does that sound right? Start there, and then every year we would put in 10% and up to 15% depending on of the fees generated into that fund. So it is not restricted for any particular reason.
So if you're gonna make recommendations of how much of that money could be used, how much do you wanna keep in
3 years
reserve?
operating, I'll say it.
How much?
3 years operating,
3, yeah,
so
okay.
no more than 10.
Should it be more? And, I guess, the only reason I say that is, if looking at this budget, like honestly, looking at the operating expenses, nothing really jumps out to me as if it's a meaningful change or increase over historical operating expenses. And so from that standpoint, it looks like the numbers are reasonable, and they're probably where they should be as a going concern. The main difference here is there's obviously a huge reduction in revenue, and to the extent that historically COMIDA has received $2 million in fee income, but that trend has gone down. The only reason that it has increased historically is because there have been one-time non-recurring events that aren't really representative of really what the true earnings potential of the enterprise actually is. Then a more conservative approach would be to assume that revenue is going to continue to decrease. And if there's $17 million in reserve to help cover that, I honestly, this, from like putting my private sector hat on, like this concerns me. Because what it speaks to is that it's not a viable enterprise into the long run, right? You're going to continue to eat into your reserves to fund operations unless we figure out a path to, meaningfully increase revenue. Because, I don't see, like, where can you cut?
Well, you can cut the workforce development fund.
But yet, at one point when right, so we cut the workforce development fund, but again, like we could do that, but that'll be devastating, right? I mean,
It's a great point, but let's take the workforce development out of it.
Sure.
Because let's say that has been funded, set that aside. Let's just use round numbers. Let's say it's 2 million this year, right? Our overall expenses are 4. And this has historically been the numbers.
But that core includes
2 million of
workforce
workforce.
development.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry.
So our expenses, right, are $2 million a year, and that has been what it has been for forever.
Yeah.
To Truman's point, let's just, right, so now we're saying we're gonna generate $1 million in fee income and $2 million of expenses.
Yeah.
We are gonna have a deficit for $1 million for the foreseeable future.
Right.
Now, the little bogey is there, we got $600,000-700,000 of earnings on our investments.
sure.
But that'll go down as we eat into, like Truman's point is, how long are we gonna continue to spend $1 million more than we're bringing in? Like, what does that look like? And that's really what the conversation needs to be about. If we like normalize it and say, okay, we can go on for, again, if we just had to say 17 years, right? We got $17 million, we can take $1 million a year, we're gonna eat into that, right? So we're gonna get 17 years if we continue at this rate. And so, that's, like I said, what other levers, what other things that we wanna, try to, is it a, hey, we're gonna hopefully get these big projects? Like,
Right.
right, or like, are there other things to Truman's point again, is the core COMIDA fees are not those big ones, right? Those are home runs, those, what are the ones that are our normal, fee generating type of projects that, that we can continue to kind of look at?
What we don't know is, as conditions around the country changes, how desirable is Western New York gonna be? I mean, there's a lot of assets that we have here that as the weather changes around the country, as social policies evolve around the country, we may look at this region for a place to settle. We just don't know that at this point.
Right, and that's a good segue to the fact that as we are feeling the impact of, as revenues are reducing, it's kind of in line with an overall economic softening that we're feeling nationally. So we're kind of in lockstep with the macro level economics, and how long is this economic decline going to be underway? We don't know. One thing that I set in motion a few years ago, and I think it's worth sharing and refreshing everyone on, is the partnership with Greater Rochester Enterprise. So when we look at that revenue, the fee income, those are all generated by projects. And the more proactive we can be around engaging with project owners and applicants and thinking about COMIDA like a business and kind of flexing our business development capabilities, the quicker we can close on these projects and fee income. So we have this great relationship with Greater Rochester Enterprise, whereby they exist kind of almost like a sales force to, they're marketing and selling Monroe County and the surrounding 8 counties as a place to locate and do business and expand, and they're bringing project opportunities to us. So they engage with us regularly. We recently brought them in for a powwow about projects in the pipeline. Robin regularly convenes the economic development staff on pipeline meetings. We have a CRM platform that we utilize, and we're considering investing in a new and more sophisticated CRM platform. So I think we have to keep beating that drum of thinking about COMIDA as a business and being in business development, sales mode as much as we are around compliance and kind of getting through the day-to-day. So, but again, the larger economic trends are not great, I think, at the moment, and we're feeling that locally, like smaller, medium-sized businesses, our bread and butter project owners are kind of saying, things are a little uncertain right now, I'm not gonna buy that big piece of equipment right now, I'm gonna wait, or I'm not in growth mode, I'm actually maintaining my staff levels, I'm not adding, therefore I am not eligible for COMIDA benefits for a potential expansion because I'm not adding new jobs. So that's factoring into what you're seeing manifest on our balance sheets. But we are, like I said, sitting pretty on some strong resources that are a result of some huge projects that they didn't fall out of the sky. Fairlife was a result of a lot of proactive engagement with GRE. COMIDA led the charge on that. Likewise, the Li-Cycle, now Glencore project, which is reactivated and in motion again, that was a result of many years of collaboration and proactive engagement with businesses and kind of hand-holding. Amazon, again, that was one where they came straight to us. So we hope for future unicorn project opportunities, and we'll get there, I think, by continuing to strengthen our relationship with Greater Rochester Enterprise, with the Chamber, think of ourselves as a sales force also, and stoke our resources around, you know, the CRM platform and periodic regular meetings with GRE's business development team, et cetera.
And I think if you look at the IDAs from around the state, we're really in good shape. So everybody is struggling, but thanks to you guys, we're getting the projects more so than most of the other IDAs.
And we run way leaner from an administrative. I mean, like, if you look at other IDAs in terms of, like, just the expenses, forget about work program expenses, like administrative stuff, like if you look at, you know, that, we run, I think, way leaner than others of our size and of the, you know, certainly in terms of the amount of fee income that we have
And it isn't
generated.
just lean, is it?
It's
lean.
You guys are good.
yeah, it's lean, like, it's lean, right, so.
It's user-friendly too. I think people like dealing with COMIDA. We're not as onerous to work with as some other IDAs.
Yeah, so I think the conversation is, okay, here we are, we're in year one of our, maybe like this, which is great to recognize it in year one, but like, you know, okay, we get into year two and maybe we have a down year again, but like, at what time do we say, okay, like, from more of a strategic, right, which is all the stuff that we're talking about, like, do we, you know, press our resources with GRE or be way more, maybe we can't be more active than we are, but on a sustainability, on a going concern basis, if we continue, if we have 3 years of $1 million or less, what are we saying? What are we gonna say? Are we gonna say, well, we're just gonna ride it out for the next 15 years and, right, like, so that I think we're recognizing it now. I just think there's an opportunity as we go into years 2, 3, and 4 to be like, okay, it hasn't changed, right? We're still in a declining fee generating project. Hey folks, you know, 10 years from now, we won't, right? Like,
Or potentially even sooner than that, right? I mean, we're projecting a $2 million, $2.3 million deficit for next year. And so, you know, what I heard Greg you say, which is, I think, a critical point, a lot of the workforce development funds that we show in 2026 have already been committed. So those are funds that, for all intents and purposes, we have to pay out. And so, you know, although I agree we should take a, you know, cautionary stance when it comes to cutting back on programming, to the extent that we are, you know, pre-committing dollars, right? And waiting to see how the revenue side of the equation turns out, that's a precarious position to me to actually be in, because that's really the only lever that we really have to pull back on. And so as we begin to think about how we want to allocate, you know, these workforce development dollars, you know, maybe it really is, okay, well, we don't want to cut back, but we're not going to increase it from where we currently are. And so right now what we're doing is increasing it by $400,000. That's already done. But I think we should be very proactive thinking about how that's going to play out, you know, 2027, et cetera.
And
Maybe,
I think it got, in Truman, I think it got that way because of all the revenue that came in. So
Sure.
we just need to slow that down.
Right.
yeah, and it's a good point, because after this year, right, once we get through workforce development, like, we can go back when we're at this spot next year and say, okay, we want to be neutral. We want, I mean, you know, maybe next year that's the conversation, is like, oh, how can we be no income, no profit, right, no loss?
right.
And right, we need to get past the workforce development we've already committed to. We're probably not that far away from it. Like, I don't think we're not, because we'll have, if we do $1 million and we do 600,000 of earnings, well, $1.6 million, generally, we have about $2 million of COMIDA expenses outside of workforce development. That gap is only about $400,000, which I think we may have to solve for, right? And that's if revenue stays at $1 million, right? So that's the number that goes down, that 400,000 goes up. If it goes above that $400,000 deficit goes down.
This is why we try not to make multi-year commitments to workforce programs. There have been a couple of instances, I think the Ibero program and Tracks, yeah, there are a handful where they made a special request and it was of interest to the administration that for COMIDA to work with those organizations. But this is exactly why it's our protocol not to entertain multi-year.
And I think we had that 3 or 4 years of the revenue that we could look at
Right.
doing multi-year.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, I think we should move away from making special accommodations.
Couple related questions. Is Visit Rochester, GRE, and the Chamber kind of working together on development issues?
Yes and no. They work together collectively on the One Rock initiative and have regular kind of convenings. The Chamber and GRE work more closely together around services to existing local businesses, matters pertaining to the workforce and talent retention.
Well, just because, you know, one of the things that you run into when you're working on projects is there's kind of a lot of Indians sometimes, and they operate in their own silos. And a siloed approach sometimes doesn't really fix a problem because they're working in their own little silo.
Right.
And like the county provides assistance to Visit Rochester. We want to make sure that they are working with other organizations that want to grow our base.
Yes, that's a great point. And I think exactly that is why this One Rock initiative manifested over the course of a few years. Recently, it was Rock 2025, now it's One Rock. So I think there have been some pretty strident and successful efforts to ameliorate the silo problem, but there's still a lot of work that.
Right, and then my other question really, and it's coming up all over the place right now, power,
Yes,
the
yes.
availability of power. You know, what are we kind of seeing, what are we doing, what are those organizations doing to push
Right.
RG&E
And that's where Power Up New York, this new, I think it's a $300 million grant program that the state enacted. IDAs are eligible to apply. That's where, coming up in the next couple of weeks, the county executive is gonna have an audience with GRE, with RG&E to talk about, okay, do we have any low-hanging fruit project opportunities for this grant program where COMIDA can be supportive, be a conduit? Because that's where we've been very successful with the Fairlight project, there were a couple of other Fast New York initiatives, projects where COMIDA was a partner that raised a
I
really
thought the
good.
report that in Ontario County was a little unfair, because if you, how do you blame a power company for not having power available if you're not telling them what projects are gonna come down the road? I mean, why would an electric company develop a power grid if there's no demand for their power? So it's kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
So have we lost any projects because of our electricity infrastructure?
I think Henrietta lost a couple
Yes,
of
they
projects
did.
alone just because of the infrastructure.
Right.
But then they were able to arrange to get
And that was again where
transformers.
COMIDA was the
Right.
conduit, was the
Involved.
partner.
Correct.
Yes, GRE maintains a pretty well vetted list of
Project
concrete
deals,
examples.
right? Like,
Yeah,
So
and there's a lot too where like the site selector or business owner will have conversations and then determine, oh, you don't have any power, so I'm just gonna go look at the next
Yeah.
viable option. So they maintain that list in their CRM.
how important is it, what the county exec is looking for and shovel-ready? How important is that? Is that important for us to move forward for projects?
Yes, and I think too, hearkening back to Howard's point earlier about like, with climate change and whatever else, whatever other dynamics are at play, there may be potential future demand for projects in Greater Rochester and Monroe County that wouldn't have otherwise existed. So we should get out in front of potential economic opportunities like that with infrastructure investments. And that's where some further analysis is needed. We need to look countywide. Where is there, more than 50 or 100 contiguous acres? And is that land dry? Like, what is the water sewer hookup situation?
Is that
What's
part of
the, and IDAs, yes, so this is like what happened at, I think it's White Pines or White Spruce in Onondaga County. The Onondaga County IDA over 20 years made these, like, acquired land, put utilities in the ground, and then over time, it became a favorable site
Ready
for
to go.
Micron.
Ready
Yes,
to go.
right, and I'm not saying that that we're trying to get a Micron in Rochester, that'd be great, but if there's an opportunity for us to make long-term investments in site acquisition and infrastructure development to help make it so that, like, a future Fairlife type project, it's very easy for that decision maker to say, oh yes, I want to locate my project here because you have everything all ready to go, versus having to go through the whole rigmarole of begging the state for money, but,
And you could, I mean, again, if you've looked at it and, if GRE has the data that says, hey, here's all the projects that we didn't win, maybe. You look at what that return would have been, you look at what the county has to spend on that infrastructure, it just allows, putting data next to the analysis, right? That says, hey, we could have generated X amount of dollars, not just COMIDA income, but again, what are you talking about? Tax income, all of that, right? Like, this is what the county would have generated. Here's our cost, here's our return on that number. It's just like any other return, right? And that's really, I'd be interested to know if GRE, or I'm using that as more of a general term, but if they're the ones who are kind of the sales engine, do they have an outlook over on the next 3 to 5 years about projects that are coming here? Like, it'll help us.
they do.
When we look at this and be like, oh wow, like, it's more dire than we thought, or hey, no, we think this may, that's a little bit of dip, it may get a little rocky for a couple years, but we do see something on the horizon going back up, because I think as we get to next year, whatever that may be, we might go, okay, like, we gotta kind of let this play out a little bit more, because we have some data that supports maybe an uptick, or no, this is gonna continue to be rocky before it gets better. Then okay, I think that helps us plan a little bit more.
That's a great point. They do. They're members of the Site Selectors Guild, and they go to Semicon West and all the big industry conferences. They're talking to the big decision makers on a national, international scale, so they're able to, like, formulate some conclusions about this is what the pipeline's gonna look like in the next few years. And that's why we bring them together with our team periodically to talk through our respective project pipelines. And we attend, their investor meetings and their board level meetings. I think it might make sense to bring Matt in front of the board to talk through this at some point. Like, especially the insights around, what are site selectors saying right now about the state of the economy? What are current businesses in Greater Rochester saying about their plans for future projects? And how can we factor that insight into our financial?
Our assets are very welcoming here, plenty of water, everything's 20 minutes away, weather doesn't kill you, great education systems here. So I think we should get ready for what could be people looking to Western New York.
Yeah, let's hope.
The Bills gotta start winning again, but
Right, and the housing thing too, we're gonna talk about our housing
that's
study at the
actually
board
another
level.
piece that is really critical to.
Well, and a lot of the builders, because of the new regulations supposedly coming out in January, I've got a nephew and niece that are gonna build, they're trying to get all the permits in before the end of the year because the new regulations are all electric.
Right.
And we don't have the electricity for it, so.
Yeah, there may be there's some conversations occurring right now,
Yeah,
kind of on the quiet side of politics.
right.
And one of the things I think you like to remind people of, look, electric is wonderful, but what happens in the next ice storm?
Right.
And all those generators turn on. They can't turn on, there's no gas.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there's only so much we can do, so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know that their builder is really pushing them to get, I mean, they're rushing everything through just in case, because they're talking a difference of like $30,000 on the house they're gonna build,
Right.
so.
So it's increasing the cost, right? So I mean, I think that, Greg, your point is a critical one and very insightful. Like, I was thinking about it too, but I was coming at it from a slightly different perspective, which is everyone, like, the power conversation has been going on for years, right? And honestly, I've never seen a project not move forward because of power. Maybe there's been a delay, but I've never seen a project not go forward. But, you know, coming at it from the standpoint of if we can really illuminate for folks what the opportunity cost is for losing projects because we don't have the infrastructure to, you know, attract those types of developments, I think that that would probably, you know, ignite, you know, a little bit more of a fuse than having this abstract conversation about there's no power, right? Because I've heard it, especially being in the real estate community, and all that means is that you have to plan, right? You're gonna add on additional time to get the utility to bring power to the site, or you've gotta, or even with, you know, getting chillers or HVAC equipment, you know, these types of things, you just plan for it. And so that adds on time to your development timeline, but it's never been, you know, one of those, you know, critical paths that you can't cross. But if we are losing projects, like that's a completely different conversation.
And Truman, when you're talking about Fairlife happened quick, right?
Yeah.
Shovel ready?
Quick, so it was a blood, sweat, and tears kind of a case study because they came to us initially because what's their raw material? Milk. They knew that around this region, within a certain catchment area, they had certain, enough fluid milk. So that was why they initially looked at Greater Rochester and Monroe County. They came to us, we brought GRE into the fold, and they were looking at kicking the tires on a couple of sites that just didn't meet their needs, I think acreage-wise. And GRE encouraged them to look at this Tibor Road site in Webster that was greenfield, flat, dry, but didn't have any of the utilities. And so as soon as they said, okay, yes, we're interested in this, we had to get creative about bringing in the governor's office, bringing in our G&E, and figuring out how to address, because they were ready to sign on the dotted line and go to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania went so far as to enact a new tax credit piece of legislation for Fairlife specifically for that project. So they were ready to go to Pennsylvania, but it was because we figured out how to, COMIDA was the first Fast New York grant recipient because of how quickly that decision and the dynamics in place. But if it weren't for salesmanship and, you know, GRE thinks of itself as a business and markets and sells the 9-county region as its product, if it weren't for their efforts to really push, that wouldn't have materialized for us.
But it happened quick enough for Fairlife to say yes.
Yeah, I know in Henrietta, we lost 2 businesses because the electric couldn't come quick enough and they weren't willing to wait. So, I mean, we had approved them and they ended up going someplace else, so.
Within Rochester, or did they leave the county?
I believe they stayed in the county, they just didn't stay in Henrietta.
Right. I remember being,
I wish I could remember who they were and I can't.
we were pulled into a couple of those discussions, but the developers were really upset too, because over the course of many years, they had invested in, they had done proactive investments with with RG&E, and the business model is kind of complicated with the Public Service Commission and developers being obligated to.
So there was a lot of, I mean, they had to pay, there was a lot of money they were gonna have to pay to get it into there, and it was just a whole lot of costs and stuff, and they just were like, I think they patiently tried to stick with it, one of them did, and then it was just like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
What's happened, this doesn't have anything to do with Monroe County, but what's happened to the Micron project in Syracuse? They ran into some bureaucratic issues. Have they broken ground? Are they actually doing?
I think ground may have been
Finally,
broken, but you're absolutely right, there's state level regulations that are onerous, including some wetlands,
environmental issues there.
yes, so that's been an ongoing issue.
Just curious.
And then there's a federal funding piece too, I think that's complicated.
We
but-
gotta grow the base.
Right,
So it's a step toward the end of 2025.
Yes.
That's why they came in.
but understanding, so with an eye towards future fee income, it would be good for COMIDA to engage in some conversations with GRE and these other partners about, are there ways that we can
No, I agree.
invest in sites and facilities that will make it easier for companies to do a project there and pay COMIDA a fee for benefits, and also to, continuing to work with GRE to engage with local businesses and make sure that we are thinking creatively about what defines a project. You know, there's oftentimes, like, we introduced the small project tier a couple of years ago, for projects less than $500,000, the sales tax exemption. If we can get innovative in that way and see if we can, meet the needs of existing businesses in a
Well,
creative
right,
way.
if there's a common theme about why we're not closing projects, something like that, or at a smaller level, that allows us to consider taking our considerable resources and saying, hey, we're gonna support that now, right? Because that'll generate fee income for us. Like if there's a commonality of we're losing, and I don't think we're losing a lot of deals, or I don't know what that number is, but let's say we lose 4 or 5, and I don't know what that number looks like. I mean, it could be something significant enough that says, okay, hey, these companies are saying the same thing, right? And that at least allows us to or communicate, hey, in order for us to continue to grow or maintain that level, here's what we think we need to bring to the community.
Yeah, just so you know, that the barn bazaar is down.
Oh,
And,
wow.
they're ready to
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
start the
great.
apartments.
Okay.
Yeah, it was interesting. One day the buildings were up, the next day
They're down.
they were down.
Yeah. Well, and
Amazing.
to that point, housing projects like that one, as we look to finalize the housing study and bring some recommendations to the board, you know, there's potential that COMIDA could introduce a new tier of, whether a pilot program for certain types of eligible housing projects. There's a lot of demand for housing that could bring more of these developers to COMIDA and thus fee revenue, and that's an example of us using our powers for good. There's a deficit of housing in the community, so if we can get creative about that, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, there was a modification of an agricultural district out by Mendon where Spall's building homes,
Oh,
and
okay.
he can build more homes now.
I might almost argue, and I hear you, and I'm not pushing back on using, I think the $17 million to invest in infrastructure projects. I think it's like a worthy idea to pursue, and it makes a lot of sense. But I don't know if the timing for something like that feels right now.
Fair.
Specifically if we know that revenue is going down, and like financial stability, it seems like it's far away.
Right.
But I've seen it, and I can promise you it's not that far away.
Right.
It takes a couple of bad years for
Sure.
liquidity to really become a concern. And I know this isn't a private enterprise, but one of the main things that I've learned is that companies don't go out of business because they're insolvent. They go out of business because they're liquid. And so because you have a substantial reserve today, you're in a very healthy financial position, and I think it really behooves you to try and maintain that position. If we want to look at ways to utilize those funds to increase revenue and to stabilize fee income going forward, then maybe, and I'm just playing, you'll find this out about me. I play devil's advocate all the time, so I'm not pushing back on anything. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Signal
Maybe-
high intellect.
And so maybe one of the things that we want to think about is increasing the benefit from the pilot agreements, right? Getting a little bit more aggressive with pilot agreements. Because what that signifies to the development community is that we are actively pursuing these projects and we want to support them. And, you know, to the extent that that happens, then I think maybe you'll start to see an increase in applications and an increase in revenue. You know, I know that historically there was a project, you know, COMIDA had a program where, you know, you could potentially buy down your interest rate, right? You know, I believe, I don't know, I don't remember what it was called, but, you know, I think that was significant. That's no longer something that we do. And so, you know, if it's really about generating additional fee income, then maybe we can think about pathways that will lead to more direct, right, increases in applications and revenue, as opposed to making investments in infrastructure that may be some correlation, right, but it's not, you know, correlation doesn't always like mean causation, right? Just because we make an investment doesn't mean that they will come. You know, I think there's probably a higher level of certainty that if we increase the benefits, that will lead to higher applications and higher revenue, as opposed to going out and putting millions of dollars in a public infrastructure project.
That's a fair point, right. I brought that up more so because of the interest of the county executive in it, and then the existence of that state grant program. So to the extent there's some opportunity for us to bring in more state grant dollars to Monroe, I think it behooves us to think about it in the near term. But absolutely, you're right, we need to maintain our resources through a time of economic uncertainty.
Sure.
And we could also talk about our fees, the fees that we charge, changing our fee schedule. I'm not sure the last time that we did change our fees. It was, and how we compare it to, I think we're favorable in comparison to
Did
some.
we change them a couple years ago?
We just added the, small business loan.
Okay.
Truman, to go along with what you were saying, we still would like to know where there's shovel-ready locations, correct? You're saying we shouldn't just go ahead without, but it helps to know. And would that be GREs doing for the county? They're the ones.
Yeah, they maintain, that's their subject matter expertise, is understanding where are there sites and buildings that are ripe for investment, and where are there utility challenges. RG&E sits on their board, as does COMIDA, as does the county executive. So for this Power Up New York grant opportunity, it's possible that there might be a location that's in need of some investment where GRE has identified that if only we could bridge this delta, the utility capacity, we could bring in a big project. We would have a seat at that table, as would RG&E, and I think that there's a matching model within that grant, so there would be a COMIDA investment and then a grant award from the state, and then RG&E I think would have some skin in the game as well. But we would only go down that road if there was a real opportunity that was vetted, and we would bring that to the board.
Okay, makes sense.
So I think it's a great conversation and everything we're talking about. Like, it really helps us kind of, you know, whether we have those answers today, but it'd be interesting to, get with GRE and have a better perspective, I think, for all of us, right, as we move forward. So next thing is you do have a detail of the workforce development fund summary. I just want you to look at that. That does tie to our overall budget. Again, really just to give you visibility into what that looks like, what we're, the overall summary of the funds that we have committed since inception, and then what that looks like. Obviously, this is our last big year with respect to expenses, and we're projecting $1.8 million of those expenses in 2026. So, any questions or comments on any of that? Again, right, like, you could look at these other expenses and we could talk about them in detail, but this is really the most, this is 50% of our budget here, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time on and if anyone's got any questions on any of these.
So you can see, yeah, the multi-year programs include Barrow, I think SEIU was a 3-year commitment. Yamtep has come back every year.
Yeah. Yeah, some of these may not be multi-year, like Yamtep came back for a new ask.
The only ones we're obligated
Tracks.
to through 27 are
Tracks, right?
tracks and
So that's why it's
contractually, yeah.
when we're talking to community partners about workforce programs and their eligibility, I always preface those conversations with, COMIDA is not a foundation. We don't have an endowment. These resources come direct from project fees. So in a bust year, not a boom year, when we don't have a lot of project fee income, we're not gonna be able to commit a lot through workforce development. So, I think people tend to understand that, but they still refer to COMIDA as COMIDA grants, which we don't do grants.
Well, it's easy to understand why in the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been a gravy
And
train.
Truman, that's what you're talking about. We have to be careful about that. We need the revenue as well.
And that mirrors.
This is phenomenal work, though. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers, and kudos to the entire team and to COMIDA for making the investments in the community. We need this stuff to happen. It's sad if we have to fall back on it, but sometimes austerity means that you have to take care of yourself first.
And staff's working on a prospectus, like a glossy kind of marketing document that shows since 2022, since COMIDA modernization, our 50th anniversary, the historic investments that we've made through the Workforce Development Fund. That'll be up on our website, it'll be available to the board. And Howard, to your credit also, I think you raised with us that members of the legislature don't always know about what COMIDA does and how good we are and the good that we do in the community. So that we took that and we worked on this, and I think we'd love for you to distribute among your colleagues at the appropriate time. So that's a prospectus coming soon. And then
Do you wanna put something together from a PR standpoint that I can give to the members of the legislature?
Yes.
It'll be very printed, yeah.
I think county communications is gonna do a press
Terrific,
release.
that would be,
Yeah,
that would be perfect.
yes,
Perfect, thank you.
of course.
There was just one thing that I wanted to mention on here. We hadn't finalized it, but we are looking at doing a website refresh. Hasn't been done in 7 years, so that website maintenance would go from 5,000 to actually 35,000 is what we're looking for the website. So, sorry, Greg.
Did you say 5 to 35?
35, yeah.
Is it possible that any piece of, because we're getting an increase on MCIDC, to the ARPA microloan program, is there any potential that ARPA funds could cover some of that? Just because it's the same website, it's the same.
Yeah, we could look at that.
Okay.
Probably, I would think, yeah.
Okay. Just a thought. We'll plan to cover it, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you look at the overall expenses, right, so, to kind of summarize where we're at, obviously the program community development represents about 2.468 million, which most of that is workforce development. Our general and administrative expenses, most of it's fairly consistent. We do have some numbers in there like dues and subscriptions. We're looking at, some CRM, some iPads, all that's kind of an increase there, but nothing, going from 29,000 to 45,000 of dues and subscriptions. But overall, I think the expenses are fairly lean, as I would say, and expenses are a little over $4 million. It brings us to a total of $2.3 million deficit for this year, and like I said, that's based on $1 million of fee income, and that number alone is gonna move the needle, right? Plus or minus, and that number's gonna increase, or if we do better than $1 million, it's gonna go down. But I do think, like everything that we've been saying, I think once we get past the workforce development, which should be this year, we should all, we could look at a 5-year run rate about, okay, like, hey, now that we have a better idea, if we bring in $1 million and we spend $2 million, here's our 17 million, what does that look like? And with a little sensitivity to it, I think it'd be a good exercise for us to go through.
I agree.
This is kind of echoing conversations that I've had across the street with the executive's office about the county's budget. We're looking ahead at what's gonna be a difficult year in 2026, and then I think the concerns are even greater for 2027. And I understand sales tax collections are down. There's obviously the federal funding piece of it with the ARPA funds expiring at the end of 2026, so that's an element. But those are leading indicators of like larger economic dynamics that impact economic development and thus the project pipeline, so.
And when the county budget comes out, there's a lot of confusion around taxes because many of the towns have not reassessed. And that's causing this discussion between tax rates and levies to muddy the waters about, are we high tax here or not? So it's gonna be kind of an interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Everybody I talk to that doesn't live in New York State is like shocked at what we pay for taxes.
Yeah, we're very high
Property
taxes here.
I mean, if you compare our schools to down south, we have better schools than,
Oh, sure.
most people down south are putting their kids in private schools, so then but my nephew's in Atlanta and he said their taxes are going down, they're gonna do luxury taxes now, and he's, I asked him, I go, his house was $700,000, I go, what are you paying in taxes? And he goes, oh, I think they're about $6,000.
Oh dear God.
And I was like,
I came close to buying a place in Naples, Florida. And again, the attractiveness of supposed low taxes. Well, first of all, you gotta bond all the infrastructure for 20 years. So you have to pay for that. Then there's the golf course fee, the homeowner's fee. I mean, it's, when you add it all up, yes, it's a little higher here, but
Yeah.
I looked all over the East
I
Coast.
love
I
it.
gotta tell you,
You are Rochester through and through.
the only place I would save money is Tennessee.
Yeah. Only Tennessee?
Yeah.
Really? What about Texas?
I didn't look at Texas, 'cause
Okay.
I wanna be
well,
on
see,
the
that's
East
what they're
Coast.
trying to do in Georgia now, is what they did in Tennessee. Everybody went to Tennessee because it was so much less, and now it's what they're trying to do in Georgia now. That's why they're doing the luxury,
Try to get
introducing the
medical care.
luxury tax. Yeah, so.
Yeah, it is what
And
it
good
is.
schools, that's a.
But I just, as the budget comes out, I just think pay very close attention to what people talk about taxes, and you're just gonna have to, as people start highlighting tax rates, tax rates vary on a whole lot of things. It's what's happening to the levy, how much money do you need from the taxpayer, what's happening to that?
Is there a windfall provision for the county and the tax for the levy? Like in other, Pittsburgh, for example, if the budget is balanced, as they go through a reassessment cycle, they can't over assess such that it's going to cause a surplus in the budget. And so it's called the windfall provision to make sure that they're not overtaxing, and sometimes the tax rate actually has to go down because it would create a surplus for the municipality.
Yeah, there's no technical way to do that here.
Okay.
The problem we have here is, I'll just give you an illustration. Pittsburgh hasn't reassessed since 2017.
Sure.
And because of that, the house that I paid $560,000 for is now currently full value assessed at $921. But for my town taxes, I pay on $525. But
Yeah.
for the county taxes and school taxes, it's based on the full assessed value.
I see.
And my house is not worth anywhere near $928,000.
So
I'd be
that's a good
surprised.
assessor.
The market is changing.
Yeah.
It is changing. It's slow. It's higher, 500 and above are not as
Attractive.
Yeah, they're slowing down at that range.
Oh, interesting, okay.
I have a client that wrote an escalation up to 625, the house was 499, she wrote 510 escalating to 625, and we got it for 525.
Oh,
Wow,
really? So
Yeah.
it's slowing down?
Two big houses have gotten much real, we haven't gone to full escalation.
interesting,
Wow.
okay,
Yeah, so like, I would say 500 and above, we're seeing is they're going past delayed,
okay.
so.
But it's that, the tier, the tiered lower.
Oh, yeah, the well, I'll let you know, I'm listing one tomorrow at 224, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
But yeah, the lower ones are still going,
Okay.
but the more expensive ones are not.
Well, we've had a robust discussion here. Robin had to run to do a project call, I think. And did we cover the investments pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can see the detail in here with, right, with all the investment portfolio that HPA's put together, just kind of shows all of our holdings, right, in terms of, where we're at. Again, you know, I don't know if we need to go into great detail, but you can see our total, cost and value and annual income we generate from that, and certainly all the related, you know, due dates and maturity dates on those. Have any questions, I can take those back to
Yeah, the
HPA.
rates are really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
looks good to
better
me.
than mine. Mine.
So, is there any other questions, concerns about any of the numbers? Do we need to make a motion to, okay?
With
So
one
moved.
adjustment, right? With the one adjustment.
Right,
Oh,
with
Yeah.
The
Oh, the
website
Yeah, motion to recommend the
refresh.
full board adopt the 2026 operating budget as presented with one exception discussed.
So moved.
Thank you. And Rhett, you
Second.
also, so
Yeah.
we'll call that a second.
Sure.
And if there are no other questions, if there's no other business, we'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.